Welcome to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm Brad Williams. My guest is percussionist, composer, educator, and podcaster Josh Quillen. Josh has been a member of Sō Percussion since 2006, and his work spans contemporary chamber music, steel pan, composition, teaching, and recording. He is also closely involved with the Sō Percussion Summer Institute, an intensive program at Princeton that places young percussionists and composers inside the demands, uncertainty, and collaboration of professional ensemble life. In this conversation, Josh talks about how Sō Percussion has evolved by embracing the individual musical identities of its members, how the ensemble approaches the music of Steve Reich, and how Steven Mackey's It Is Time helped create a new creative direction for the group. We also talk about Josh's podcast, Concert Honesty, his desire to preserve the voices and experiences of older musicians, and the personal loss that shaped that mission. This is the conversation about teaching, grief, history, musical mythology, and learning to become a better listener. Here's my conversation with Josh Quillen. Josh, it is an honor to welcome you to the podcast. How are things today?
Doing really great. I'm a little tired. I apologize for making you get up at 8 a.m. in your time, but I've been sort of knee deep in the Sō Percussion Summer Institute for this past week, and we have another week coming up at Princeton here with the same batch of students. But it's like the best 2 weeks of my year, but it just absolutely saps me dry.
Oh yeah.
Physically, emotionally, but in the good way. It's like feeling like you got a good workout in.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I appreciate you hanging out with me in the middle of that. I know that that has to be a huge time investment. So yeah, right in the middle of it, I appreciate it. How's everything going with that so far?
Really great. I mean, one of the best things about this is our 18th year doing it, and one of the best things about it is every year is just a completely fresh batch. Even if there's folks that have are returning for a second or third year, the vibe of every crew is different, and it's really fun to sort of try to tease out what you can give folks in those 2 weeks, because you're only seeing them for a little bit, so you can't fix everything, you can't change everything, but trying to make everybody a little bit more of a more confident and more interesting version of themselves that they came in on day one as. And for me, it's just a really fun, it's really, really inspiring, and just a shot in the arm to see kids just really embrace the adversity and the things that we're asking them to. We're asking them to do the impossible, which is learn a ton of music in a very short amount of time with people they've never met. And, so
yeah.
Anyway, it's going really well. Very excited
great.
for the second week.
When that summer session starts, do you guys have kind of an order or a list of things that that you want to approach with these young players, or do you just kind of wait and just evaluate where they are and then adjust as needed?
Well, we pre-program a lot of the rep ahead of time, and we try the best we can based on their application tapes that they send in to sort of assign stuff appropriately for. I mean, everybody's coming in at different skill levels and experience levels. Some people are grad students. Some people are just graduating high school, getting to go into their freshman year. So many things can be true at the same time. And I think we we try, again, 18 years in, I have enough data to know the sort of pacing of the 2 weeks. And I generally try to just get the lay of the land for the first couple of days. They're all nervous. They don't want to be that person in a rehearsal who's not prepared. But inevitably, every one of them is going to experience some level of insecurity. So I kind of just like let that play out a little bit and gently nudge them in certain directions to sort of be like, it's going to be all right. You know, you're scared right now. You're nervous. You're insecure. It's like, welcome to the club. You know, I'm just better at hiding it than you are. And, or I've just done it more. And but then you sort of start to take the reins a little bit towards the end of the first week and really start to push them to pass the point where they think they could go. And inevitably everybody in their own way kind of breaks a little bit and they have a dip, but I'm just like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to the club. I have a break every other week on something. And so, but you'll be okay. There's real problems in the world, and you being stressed out about missing a note definitely is not one of them. So yeah.
I attended 4 summers. I did 4 summers at music programs when I was in high school, and I still feel like I'm drawing from that experience many, many years later, just of understanding process and, like you're saying, really focusing on the big picture and not the small little details of missing a note here and there. I think that those summer programs are so important for developing musicians.
Yeah, and when I was a student, I started my undergrad in 1998. I went to Ohio State for 2 years and then transferred to the University of Akron, and then went to Yale for my grad work, which is where I sort of met, the Venn diagram overlapped with the Sō Percussion folks at that time. And there's a time and a place when you're in school during the school year, it's like you're paying money to be there. So don't leave any stone unturned. Practice 12 hours a day. See what it feels like to just do a snare drum roll for all day.
Yeah.
You're not going to be asked to do that in the real world, but just, really milk it for what it's worth. And then the reality is, once you get out, the reason you were doing that obsessive sort of practice ahead of time was that you just don't have time once you're out. You have to pay taxes. The lawn needs mowed. You have to pay the rent, you get married, you have kids. Like, there's a million things that start to come into play. And I'm so grateful that, I had those 2 years at Yale to just, be in a room by myself, shedding for 8 to 12 hours a day and constantly hearing people who were better than me, but realizing that they're also really lovely people. Like, one of my colleagues, Ayano Kataoka, who now teaches at UMass Amherst, she's just this like 3-foot tall Japanese woman who just makes sounds that I've never heard anybody make in my life. And to be a kid from rural Ohio and walk in the room and be like, oh my God. But she would bring me like tea and apples and stuff and be just like, you look hungry, Right. and she's a colleague and a dear friend of mine, still to this. Anyway, long story short, there's a time and a place, and I think SOCI is not the time and the place to obsess about every right note. It's to realize that it's to give them a taste of, this is what you're in Sō Percussion for 2 weeks. This is actually what we do.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So I have to tell you that when I started doing this podcast, I don't know, I'm now north of 150 episodes, and you certainly know all about all of that, keeping the train moving. But when I started it, I had a few North Stars, I guess, of podcasts that I drew from as inspiration, and yours being one of them. I really enjoyed the conversation about process, the openness to vulnerability with your guests, not always talking about the career highlights of being a musician or whatever field someone is in. And I guess first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for being such a wonderful influence for me, for helping me get that my part of it started. And
you're quite welcome. I think whenever you, I don't want to speak for you, but when you do this stuff, it's kind of actually at the end of the day, it's for you.
I agree.
Like, I love talking to people, and we can maybe talk about the reasons I started my podcast, but it's selfish at its core. Like, it makes me feel good.
That's the first word I use anytime I describe doing mine is selfish. Yeah.
And it's not like when I started my very first one. I mean, my very first one was with my bandmate Adam Slowinski, and I was terrified. I was like, well, there's going to be a mic on, and Adam, he's just I love him to death. He can talk for days. Mm-hmm. In the best way. Like, he's so brilliant, and he just can string together all these thoughts and present things in a very genuine way. So I just knew I'd be like, okay, I gotta have one question, and then an hour later, he was kind of the best perfect guest for me to sort of get the train rolling, as you said. And but there's no way I was clocking that anybody was going to listen to it. I don't care. I'd never look at analytics. I don't monetize it. I really genuinely want for all of my guests, like whenever we're all long gone, for somebody to be able to hear and see the voice of somebody that they, I don't get to talk to John Cage. I don't get to see any good interviews where he's really and genuinely talking about all of his stuff. And so for me to get to talk to Steve Reich 3 or 4 times, or Russ Hartenberger, who I was listening to your podcast with Russ, and anyway, it's just, I want for folks to be able to have that document. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. My selfish pursuit was that I lost my father a few years ago, and
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I realized that there's been so much of my life consumed by playing music and maybe being away from home, and so much of that part of my life that my children didn't know. And I thought, let me document some of this so maybe someday they may want to listen back and hear what their old man was up to, and that's where it started for me. And I don't know about you, Josh, but I feel challenged to be a better human being, having spent so much time doing this with other wonderful human beings like yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You really sort of, you hit, in a good way, struck a nerve with me. I mean, my dad, how old was your dad when he passed away, if you don't mind me asking?
He was almost 70. So he was relatively young, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2006, when I joined Sō, I joined Sō in 2006, and it was kind of like a month in, we were on tour, and we were in, I think it was Montreal, playing a show there with this group called Matmos. And my phone rang, and I went out and answered, and my mom said, "Hey, your dad has Lou Gehrig's disease." And I was like, I didn't know what that was. It's kind of even like you could search stuff on like Ask Jeeves, and like Google was sort of starting to appear as a thing, but I just didn't know what it was. And so I went and played the show, and whatever. And then he passed away in 2009. And one of the things with Lou Gehrig's disease is that it's a neurological sort of disorder, and it affects everybody who gets it differently. With my dad, it started in his foot and worked his way up one leg, then up another leg, then his arm. And so you could sort of see this progression coming, like a slow moving train wreck, and eventually he lost his voice. And I have one audio recording of him speaking right towards before he officially kind of lost the ability to speak. And it's just him and I talking. I don't even know what it was about, maybe politics or whatever. It was something dumb. And then at the end he said, "I love you, good night." And I had this little recording of him struggling to say that. And at the time, technology, now it's like my voice can be created for somebody. If I ever lost my voice, I could just press a button now. And so, but to have that loss of the way you can speak, was really hard for me. And so that, again, selfishly, that was part of one of the reasons I started my podcast, is just not being able to talk to my dad or hear him in the way that I grew up hearing him, which was just always talking, always super psyched. He said peachy keen anytime you asked him how he was doing, even if he was doing terribly, So for me, that was kind of also a big touch point. It was my very first time on tour with Sō, and that was how my time with Sō started, was the loss of my father. So I'm really sorry and I think no matter what age you are, I was 29 when he passed away, and I think no matter how old you are, it's the worst, so I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Well, and the same to you. And, as you're telling me this, my mom's brother, my uncle, who was like a brother and also like a father to me. We had such a close relationship. He battled ALS for 10 years and God. lost
10
that
years.
10 years he had it.
Wow. Because normally for most people, it's 1.5 to 3 years. I mean, Stephen Hawking is a real outlier. He had it like for 18 years or something. But 10 years, that's wild.
Yeah, and it's such a, you really just don't know what that thing is like until you are in it, seeing someone going through it, and it's boy, oh boy. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm so grateful that you were able to capture just a little memory with your dad and be able to recall it now. Yeah.
You know, it was on an old MacBook, like G4 or something like that I had, and I have all these sound files, all these old folders on hard drives, and I was digging around the other day and found it, and you know, it's still, again, it's like you get better at dealing with grief over time, but the minute I heard that, I was absolutely transported back to being like 28 and a half, and just that little pang in my heart. Sort of, it feels like, you know, there's like pennies in my heart or something, that weird silver taste that, like, you know, and but also the feeling I had now that I didn't have then was just real gratitude. Actually, it felt like when I heard that, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so sad, but I was like, oh, it's my dad. My dad's checking in with me through me. For whatever reason, I was looking through these hard drives. It's not like I woke up in the morning. He's like, I'm going to look through all my old hard drives, but it was. Something in the air was like, my dad just needs to check in and say, hey, things are great. You're killing it. Keep cracking, you know?
Yeah, that's it.
So fades the lovely blooming flower, their solace of an hour, so soon our transient comforts fly, and pleasure blooms to die. Is there no kind, no healing art to soothe my anguished heart? Spirit of grace, be ever nigh, thy comfort's not to die. Let gentle patience smile on pain, till hope revives again. Hope wipes the tear from sorrow's eye, and faith points to the sky. To the sky.
I was happy to see that you've rebooted the podcast.
Yeah.
What led to you doing that again? And thank you for that, by the way.
Well, again, it was selfish, and it was something that had been on my mind for a long time. Pre-pandemic, I think I had done maybe 80 or so podcasts, and the pandemic hit, and I was doing all my podcasts at that time pretty much in person, because Zoom was not it existed, but it wasn't a thing that was sort of ubiquitous throughout culture. So I would just meet with people in person and have two mics set up. And I mean, my first Steve Reich podcast was sitting in his living room with a mic, like sort of precariously propped up on the arm of his couch, you know, and pandemic hit and Zoom sort of took off. And I thought, okay, well, I'm stuck in my house. I'm not the type of person who can just be alone all day. I'm actually a very sociable person. And when they were just like, you can't go outside, you can't go to bars, you can't go to restaurants. And I sort of had a panic attack a little bit. And so I dove in head first to just do like, and I think I did like 130 podcasts or something during the pandemic. And all, about coronavirus. I interviewed Richard Preston, who's the author of The Hot Zone, and met with him and talked with him a bunch about stuff. Not that, he's not like a virologist or anything, but he had done a lot of research and met with a lot of folks. And so I was just picking his brain about what we were all going through. What was quarantine? We were all doing this at the exact same time. And then as the pandemic sort of subsided and we sort of got back into re-engaging with each other publicly, for whatever reason, I mean, there's many reasons, and I don't know that it's important to dive into every one, but I just got tired. It seemed like everybody had an opinion on something, and everybody's opinion was right, and everybody's feeling was correct, and you couldn't question it. Like all of a sudden, the idea that I couldn't push somebody on it, on a viewpoint, not in the purpose of like getting them to change their viewpoint, but just kind of sharpening my axe. Like this is what I think, but I'm going to ask. Convince me, steelman this for me. Like, convince me of your argument, and that there's something in the air. The vibe just didn't feel like that was as possible, and I just got tired, and so I stopped. And I remember, I'm not going to say who it was, and it wasn't a bad podcast, but after I got done, I just said, like, I'm not good at this right now. I'm not going to release this, and out of respect for the person I was talking to, just it was not I was terrible at it at that point. And I started the last couple, my wife and I just bought our home in Yardley, Pennsylvania. And it was the first time that I realized I'm not going to have to move again. We moved like 9 times in 15 years. And something about that stability freed up a part of my brain to think about what it is I love. And I love playing in Sō Percussion. I love playing steel pan. I love being in the Caribbean community when I can get the chance to do it. But I was like, I did all these drumming podcasts for Russ Hartenberger for his website, Drumming at 50. And it was sort of the celebration of Steve Reich's drumming turning 50. And I did 54 interviews of people like Gavin Bryars and Steve and Russ and anybody who was in the room with Steve when that piece was either written or being toured initially, and all the singers. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, why? And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk to people who are over the age of 70. Not that I don't love people. Like, I'm working with 42 Soci kids these 2 weeks. Like, I love that. I love that energy. But I'm less interested in gleaning the meaning of life from them right now. And what I'm curious about is folks who have made it to 70. Like, okay, what don't I know?
Yeah.
And so I started back with Russ Hartenberger. He was the first one that I asked, because I had spoke again, like I need to talk to somebody that I know is going to be fine. And not that Russ is a chatterbox, but it was a warm blanket. And so talking to Russ, I emailed him ahead of time and I said, I don't want to talk to you about drumming, even though we did eventually end up talking about music, sort of how to play music for team musicians and stuff towards the end. But I said, I just kind of like, talk to me about 10-year-old Russ. The thing they don't tell you about, like when you look at people you admire, whether it be musicians or whoever, is that they were 10 too. They're just older versions of you. And so Russ is like, oh, that's easy. I wanted to be a fireman. My dad was a fireman. And then we sort of like went from there, and I asked him just about like, what was it like to lose 2 members of your band? I've lost my dad, but I haven't lost any of my bandmates who I love dearly. And then I got done with that. I edited, put it together, and put it out. And I was like, okay, great. I think I got like 2 likes on Facebook. And I was like, oh yeah, you don't care about that. That's not this is for you, not for likes. And so I reached out to Bill Kahn, his bandmate in Nexus, and again had the same thing with Bill. And he was telling me all about what it was like to grow up and be a student, and go to see the Philly Orchestra, and the way his YouTube at the time was to stand outside the stage door and wait for Mickey Bookspan and Alan Abel to come out the back door, and then just talk to them about like what stick they used on Scheherazade or whatever, And he sort of gave me the sort of oral history of how the percussion education system in the United States, specifically in the United States, grew out of World War II and all of the funding that the baby boomers, that generation, had post World War II. And again, not talking about drums, but just talking about, life as we often tend to clump eras where we look at like, okay, there was the Nexus era, and then there, Zamadinda, and then World War II. Well, that's over here. It's like, no. World War II was like 30,000 days ago. And if you look at it in small chunks, you realize they're all connected. And nothing has it's not like that stopped. And then we were like, oh, today we're doing this. Slavery was ended 56,000 days ago. I'm 17,155 days, 156 days now. My birthday was yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
And then I talked, and actually one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done was with Joan Tower, who is on the composition. She runs the composition department up at Bard College, and she is 87 years old. She lost her husband 3 years ago, and just talking about how she. Anyway, point being, it's not that I'm not going to talk to people under 70, but as a way to get started, I needed a filter, and for me, that's just how I work, and. I'm so grateful. I'm so glad to, I'm talking to Steve Schick, I think in a couple, like next week, maybe, David Lang, I'm going to try to get him on. Steve just had like heart surgery, and I emailed him. He's like, okay, I want to talk about having a triple bypass while learning contacta, and I have no idea how that conversation is going to go, but just, it's, to me, sorry, this is a very long answer to your question, but
I love it. No.
That is why I started it back up, was, again, the selfish, like, this is what makes me feel good. And I want people to hear, I want young students to hear that Steve Schick and Russ Hartenberger and Bill Kahn and Joan Tower are just better at dealing with adversity because they've just been around longer. Yes, they're and I hate the genius word. Yes, they're brilliant. They work hard. They've changed the field, but they're not actually that much different than you. They get up in the morning, their knees hurt, they're depressed, they're going through grief, they're having a physical ailment, and I really, not in an exploitative way, I really want just to highlight that so that people don't forget that is part of the process too.
Every angle has its fabled tangent tied behind the backs of folded hours found about the rounded corners counted towards what never quite arrived in time. An asymptote, a rhyme unfurled and further curling, further finding cursive foiling wrapped around this mortal coil. Let the soil, let the soil, let the soil, let the soil, let the soil play its simple part.
I can't remember who I had on, but at the end of the conversation, I was just thanking them for hanging out and talking with me. And it was an older guest, and he said, "I just appreciate you remembering who I am and wanting to and I think that's part of it too. That these heroes of ours, I want to continue to honor them as life goes on and as they get older, and remind them that their legacy is still going, and we haven't forgotten about them.
Totally.
Yeah.
And legacies change, and what is a legacy, and who's in charge of it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when people pass, very quickly somebody else takes up the mantle and is like, this is who this person was. And we were lucky enough to have dinner with Merce Cunningham a little bit before he passed away in his apartment.
Wow.
In the apartment where he lived with John Cage. And again, at that time, I wasn't clocking that this was something that was going to be important to me, but I just said, like, what was it like living with John Cage, you know? And he's like, well, John would sit at the table and smoke cigarettes all day and would just throw music in the trash. And I'm just like, the amount of John Cage music that is sitting in a New Jersey landfill right now. Like, and, you know, we think of Third Construction as this thing that just sort of divine from the heavens. Like, no. He was chain smoking cigarettes. And he was telling stories about going on tour. They would just like write a letter to some college, like Black Mountain College or whatever, and would write a letter saying, can we come play a show in 3 weeks? And then they would just drive there, not having heard back, and then like show up and knock on the door and just say, did you get our letter? You know, and
Wow.
you know, I'm sort of embellishing maybe some of it, but the point was that there was just a lot of DIY, like in the idea that like we, you know, there's many scenes right now. There's like, we're DIY. It's like, well, that you're just doing a new version of it. And John Cage wasn't doing anything different than you are. He got in a van with a VW bus with Merce Cunningham, Marcel Duchamp, Robert Rauschenberg, and they strapped his paintings to the top of it. You know, just. He wasn't Robert Rauschenberg at the time.
Right.
Marcel Duchamp was not who we now consider to be the father of Dada. Like, he was just sort of, they were fucking around and finding out, for lack of a better, better term, you know.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I've had some moments doing this where I've had to like pause for a moment and realize I can't believe that I'm just sitting here getting to talk to these people. You know, I'm sure it's been that way for you too. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You know, and I know you guys, you all have worked with Steve a lot over the years, but I would imagine that especially early on, there were some moments where you were like, I can't believe that I'm sitting here talking to these people. I still have those moments.
Totally. But the quicker, the thing I've learned about doing podcasts and just having conversations with people, you know, the first time we ever played with Steve in Nexus, we were doing drumming out at Ojai and drumming into Halim out at this festival in Ojai, California. And the rehearsal was in this donor's home up on this like mountaintop and like big open, like kind of like a basketball court area, living room style thing. And all the marimbas, vibraphones, or marimbas, bongos, and glockenspiels are set up. And we're sort of milling around, and I'm like introducing myself to Steve and sort of in awe of the fact that Nexus, these folks who were in the room when this piece was written. And then Russ Hartenberger just walks up and hits the bongo, and they start playing. And they play through the first movement, and then I'm supposed to play I'm playing the rock, the steady marimba part in the beginning of the second movement. And Gary Kvistad, one of the members of Nexus, and it was involved with Steve Reich early on too. Gary was supposed to come in after the phase happens, and it's just me by myself again. Gary's supposed to add in the second marimba part, and we're playing. First of all, nobody had said rehearsal started; it just started like a band, and I'm vamping, and Gary's not coming in. I'm like, where's Gary? And I look out, and he's asleep in like a hammock on the porch. And I look over at Russ Hartenberger, and he's just like, keep going, bro. And you know, Ted Atcatz was playing that show too, and you know, and nobody had talked to Ted really about how to play the piece. It was his first time ever playing that piece, and he's just looking around, totally panicked. And Russ sort of shows him what to do, and just to be in the room and have all of the myths dispelled about how this stuff.
Yeah.
Like conservatories and museums and stuff to often put things in a box to be like, look at this. This is the way it's always been. And then you realize, oh, they're a band. And the quicker you can get to past the point of worship or awe, the quicker you get to, oh.
Yeah.
You know,
that's exactly it.
Awe can sometimes get in the way of oh.
Yeah,
that's the O is way more satisfying in the long run. You know?
No, that's a wonderful way to put it. I've always appreciated Sō's interpretation and approach to Steve's music. It really, and I you know, there's so many wonderful recordings of his music everywhere. I feel like there's such a sense of groove when you all play his music. It sounds like people that maybe also played some drum set and listened to some rock music, and it kind of, it almost has a little bit of a backbeat to it when I hear it. You know, does that resonate with you when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, I joined Sō in 2006. The group was founded in 1999, and so I came in, or I've been in now for 20 years. And not to say I haven't had a say in how we play Steve's music, but when I was joining the group, there was also already a pretty solid vibe of, this is what we do, and this is why we do it, because it's slightly different. And there's no value judgment on the way Steve Reich musicians played it, or Nexus, or or Russ Hartenberger, those guys approach that music. But we didn't have the luxury of being in a band with Steve to understand exactly, really actually what he cared about. Mm-hmm. And like, I think if you were in the room with Beethoven, you might realize that possibly the thing he actually cares about is those really crazy fast tempos. Because metronome wasn't broken. He just loved to see you rip, and he loved to see bow hair flying everywhere. I don't know, I'm speculating, but having worked with enough composers now who are alive, I think that's probably more accurate. And with Steve, we didn't have that luxury. And so what we did have was a deep chamber music background of, like, we all know exactly where we are. We all know who to go to when the shit hits the fan. We all start together and we all end together. And so with Steve, with drumming, I think there was, yes, we learned it by rote. I didn't have sheet music up in front of me, but I was asked to be able to play, the whole piece is based on dugga-dun-dun, dugga-dun-dun. That rhythm, that's all you're playing, dugga-dun-dun, dugga-dun-dun. But when you phase, you're moving, my math on this is terrible, either forward or backward an eighth note or a quarter note in Steve's score. Now all of a sudden, if you start on one with everybody, now you're going dun digga dun dun digga dun dun digga dun dun digga dun dun digga, because that's where your one is now, or your group one. And so we just learned everything that way. When we played it with Nexus and Ojai with Steve comes in often on an offset pattern, and he's counting himself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he'll play digga dun dun digga dun dun, but he's coming in on 5. So there's not a group one really. They're all playing da-ga-da-da-da-ga-da-da, just starting in different places. And so that when they play it, the piece kind of winds up like an engine starting, whereas with us, it's like an electric car. You're just either on or off, and so I think that approach has, again, I think if you listen to the podcast I just did with Russ Hartenberger, he questions me on that. Like, you guys, and I think in an attempt to just be like, you do know that Steve doesn't care about this thing. You guys are worried about the wrong thing, or maybe it's time to start worrying about the other thing. You've obsessed about this other thing now. We really like the approach of it feeling like you can shut your eyes and lose yourself in Steve's music. And some other groups don't. I mean, their approach is a little bit more, there's a different lilt to the music, which is awesome. But our approach was very much like, no, this is the way we're going to do it. Because why would you come see us do it if you could just go see Nexus do it that way?
Right.
So, yeah, the approach was kind of beat into me day one of, like, this is what we're doing. And over time, we're kind of loosening a little bit on that. Not to say that if you heard it now, it would sound drastically different than what we did 20 years ago. But I think plus we're getting older and just being more open and understanding that there's not one way to do things. And if we can absorb a little bit of the way the OGs did it, it might actually enhance the way that we see the piece.
Yeah. How has that ensemble, do you feel like, has it changed, or as you're talking about adjustments as you're getting older and, perspective and life experience, how do you find that ensemble is changing as time passes?
That's a great question. And we were just talking about it the other. Steve Mackey gave a talk at SOCI and to the students, and his piece, It Is Time, that he wrote for us was kind of a big fork in the road for So. When I joined, much like drumming or So-Called Laws of Nature, there's a piece called Shifty by Dennis DeSantis that we were playing a lot early on. And Third Construction for that matter too, even though there's instruments that are slightly different between the four players, we were all playing the same setup. We were like the Blue Angels, like they're all in the same different place, and they're all moving together and everybody's doing their own thing. And that was kind of a mark that we were really proud of. But then Steve Mackey was like, you guys, we had barbecue at his house, and he said, this all unison thing, or this all the mono setup is not uninteresting, but you've done it already with David Lang and Steve and all these other folks. Like, Josh, what do you like to do when no one's looking? I'm like, well, I grew up playing steel pan in high school, and I went to Trinidad, and push comes to shove, if somebody hadn't made me choose between 4-mallet marimba and playing double seconds, that is an easy decision. I will happily sell all my marimba mallets and just play steel pan and calypso music and soca music and all of that stuff. He's like, great. And then he just did that with everybody. Jason is an amazing drum set player, studied with Steve Gadd at Eastman. Adam grew up in choirs and playing piano and loves marimba, just loves it. And for him, that's like his home base. And Eric Steve calls him a sound pervert because he loves to just tinker with things, and like, he's always messing around in Ableton and has a table a table of like all these weird bells that he plays. We call it table tennis, and he's like like making these weird composite instruments that wouldn't exist otherwise. Like, you can't just buy at Steve Weiss or on Pearl's website or something. And he learned that if you take a metronome, an analog metronome, that gravity is going to constantly pull it equally as long as it's level, and that's what a metronome has been since the jump. But if you put it on its side at a slight angle, gravity is going to pull it regularly, but it's going to be bonking, gonking, gonking with a slight light. So the first half of the beat is shorter and the second half of the beat is longer because it takes longer for that thing to fall back down. And Steve got really obsessed with all of these different things that we were bringing to the table. And so he wrote a piece that we affectionately call the Mackey Band, which is all of us doing the thing that we love to do. From that, it sort of blew out. Like, Dan Truman has written us a bunch of stuff that includes steel drums for me. I do a little bit of singing in some of Dan's pieces. Jason now is really inhabiting this drum set vibe, and we're doing a lot of stuff like Caroline Shaw. We released 2 albums with her, and we're working on a third with her and her partner Danny and they have a group called Ring Down. That's fantastic. You should all check out. And working with a lot of singers, Halado Negro, Kate Stables from this band, This Is the Kit, Becca Stevens, Alicia Olatuja, and it's really fun. Just to like, and I also love, like, as you can see, I got a bunch of like synthesizers and a box of Cheez-Its back there. But I love playing bass, like bass lines on synth, and I love really low sounds. And percussion often doesn't have that sort of like big swallow you whole sort of ocean of bass. And so I would say, the thing that's changing about us is I think we're caring less about feeling like we have to model for students this idea that like we can all play 4-mallet marimba equally, we can all play drum set, we can all do blah blah blah, and more just saying like, yes, and if you are someone who really loves playing whatever, like, this is something we're really proud of too. And it's a blast to get older and be more comfortable with yourself and care a little bit less about the stuff you used to worry about.
That's it. And we're in such a wonderful time now where I think that so much has the potential to intersect, maybe more than ever before, in being able to have all of these different interests and disciplines that kind of merge together. It's the time now is as good as it's ever been,
Yeah, no, and like again, thinking of history in days rather than chunks of time, it's kind of the way it's always been, actually. I mean, Debussy was going to the World's Fair and seeing like a gamelan and being like, what is a cortale? And Satie was hanging out with Mio and all of his buddies in France, and they formed a little club called Les Six, and they were constantly influencing each other. I think of YouTube as kind of like the most bonkers version of the World's Fair. And I'm sure if you went to the World's Fair in 1950 or 51 or whatever it was in London, you would see a lot of like, oh, that's kind of trash. But you're going to stumble into a steel band from Trinidad also, which is the very first time that a steel band, it was the TASPO, the Trinidad All Steel Pan Orchestra. The first time they were outside of the country post World War II. And the entire world all of a sudden now is like, what? And so just like every once in a while I'll go down a rabbit hole on YouTube and come across something, and there's a lot of slop, but also you're like, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
And again, I think history has a way of sort of putting genres and movements in a box and saying this is the way it always was. Bach always, Miles Davis was by himself in this genre that would only he created. It's like, well, yeah, he was in the improvising world, and many people were in the improvising world, or jazz was this thing, and the lead sheet is like specific to just no. Bach started the lead sheet or a version of it with figured bass. Why? Because he had like something like 23 kids and had a gig every Sunday and didn't have time to write everything down and would improvise. And so, yeah, you look at this Bach cantata and you're like, well, this is the way to play it. I don't know if Bach was resurrected today, he'd probably blow over the changes a little bit, and to sort of just to see him, Bach was 10 years old too. And so was Miles Davis. And so we're all on this continuum. And so I would like to think that I'd like to see the current situation we're in as just an augmented version of that rather than a completely new thing that no one else ever had.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. And if you'll humor me with it, I would love to turn that around to you briefly and just ask, what did 10-year-old Josh want to do? Where were you in life and what did you want to do?
My mom was a French and Spanish teacher. And unfortunately, I was the dumb kid who was like, I'm not learning anything from you, Mom. And I now getting to travel the world, I wish I had learned a little bit more French and Spanish. My dad worked for 7-Up Bottling Company and for 20 some odd years and loaded trucks and then was a district manager for this warehouse. And two memories come to mind. One was just walking into this huge warehouse and seeing all these trucks and these big burly guys like driving forklifts and the smell of like oil and gas and just a dingy warehouse. For some reason, that was like, oh yeah, that's rad. Seeing the organization of the whole warehouse and the logistics of how everything got onto a truck and the time things had to go out. And my dad would go from store. I would just get in the car with him and we would drive around all day. And he would go to every grocery store, and the displays of like the 2-liter bottles or the 12 packs of RC Cola, he would go in, and as somebody people buy it and they leave it, and then there's a hole in the display where that was, and he would go and rebuild the display so that it was more aesthetically pleasing. And I would just help him, and we would do that all day. We'd go back the next day and he would rebuild it again into some new sort of design or something. And I don't think of my dad as necessarily this like massively creative person, but that was his little garden that he could tend to and make it as beautiful as he could. And I just thought that was so rad. And if everybody treated their job the same way, he took real pride in it. And then the second, there was a in the warehouse, there was the air conditioners broke one day. And so the cans started to do what's called sweating, where condensation gets on them. And they were stacked really high, like 30 or 40 feet high into these cardboard boxes with pallets. Well, they sweated overnight and the boxes sort of got loose and the whole stack fell down. And it was like a Saturday morning or something, and I didn't have school, and I was maybe 16 or something at the time, and he called me and said, hey, do you want to make a little money? And I said, sure. And I had to go in for 7 hours, and he paid me like $6 an hour. I made $42 that day. And I sat on the floor and put all of those little plastic, the rings that you put the soda cans in. I sat and put thousands of them back in those rings.
Oh my.
Just sitting in the floor. But there was something about the OCD that was required to do that I just was like, well, I'm going to take this and put it here, this and put it here. And eventually this whole pile of chaos is going to be reorganized into this thing. Fast forward a little bit. The thing that I think that was like 10 to 16-year-old Josh was seeing my dad do that sort of stuff. And then I saw my teacher, Joan Wenzel. She started a steel band at my high school. And I couldn't believe that someone got to just talk about drums all day. My dad had to get up at 4 a.m. and go to work and do manual labor. His back was a mess. He loved his job. He loved being around. He was a salesman. He loved talking to people. My mom loved her job too. She was a teacher, but she would come home every night and grade papers. And the principal did this, and there was and I just saw this my other teacher just all day. She talked about rudiments and types of drum sets and Gene Krupa and steel band. And not that I think if I was with her all day, I would hear her complain about things too. But I just couldn't believe that somebody would pay anybody money to do that. Yeah. And so when I was a junior in high school, I went up to her and I said, I want to do what you do. And she looked at me and she says, you need to learn how to read music. I was like, well, you were my teacher since 5th grade. What are we talking about here? And I was definitely I worked really hard. I was, I enjoyed studying with her, but also the culture at the time, as a percussionist, you were studying snare drum. Pitches were kind of the thing. Like we would bring the flute player up to play the bell parts for the Sousa marches or whatever. And it was just true. It wasn't like I was being neglected or anything. I was rocking out on drums and drum set and timpani and all that other stuff. But she's like, oh my God, you don't know where middle C is. And so I crammed all summer to learn my audition rep and memorized everything. Couldn't sight read. Went into my first audition at Ohio State and they put up some stuff for me to read. And I just said, I'm not going to waste your time. And I think something about that honesty got me in. I think the teacher at least knew I wasn't going to lie to them. Anyway, I took you from 10-year-old Josh. I also wanted to be a music therapist. And there was a hot second where I was going to be a professional basketball player because I watched this Pistol Pete Maravich documentary. Oh, yeah. And so I shot free throws outside my house on this basketball hoop that my dad got me, in the hopes that the high school basketball coach would just randomly drive by and see the genius in my form and be like, you, sir, come with me. I'm going to take you to the pros. And then I realized I was short and had huge calf muscles, and I was maybe more suited for soccer or for being a catcher, a more sort of sedentary role.
That's great. I find there's this really interesting through line, though. It's like every situation that you've been in, you've tried to find the best way to improve the process of whatever it is that you're doing through every one of those activities, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're putting together you're putting soda cans back into their rings, there's a way to do that. If you do it for 7 hours, you realize like, oh, if I do this way, it goes in there quicker, and I can spend less. I can get more of these done in this amount of time with less energy. When you're shooting free throws or dribbling a basketball, there's ways to do it and then it dawns on you how long it's going to take you to master that. And I remembered thinking like, oh my God, to get to what I saw with Pistol Pete, like that's going to take me a lifetime. And with teaching, it's the same thing. There's things that when you say things to a student, you realize immediately that you are inefficient in the way you delivered that critique or advice or something, and there's a way to say the most surgically accurate thing without hurting someone's feelings, while also making them aware that they have a weakness, while also highlighting their strength in a way that empowers them so that they go home feeling like, yeah, I want to jump this hurdle today.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling like, no, I tried to jump the hurdle and I hit my leg and I fell and I was shamed for it. As a teacher, I've done that. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I haven't said the wrong thing in front of a student and made it worse. But the process is the same. And it's sort of clocking your own actions in real time, zooming out and saying like, 10-year-old Josh is putting these soda cans in this thing. Like, you doing it the right way? Or are you doing it the way that's best for you? Probably not. And okay, I'm going to go back into my body now and try this other way out. Oh, that worked better. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And as a teacher, like these 2 weeks at SOCI, every kid is different. Every kid needs something different from me. And every kid comes from a different walk of life, socioeconomic background, access to great teachers, access to great instruments. Everybody's coming from different backgrounds. And I like to be a surgeon with my scalpel and just walk in and be like, okay, I can cut this little fat off of you right now without you realizing it. Oh, I cut a little deep over here and you kind of twinged, and so I try to be a better surgeon as I go through the day with every student, and then just try to keep zooming out and sort of doing an autopsy on myself at the end of the day. Like, what did I do? And honestly, Brad, the person I lie to the most is myself. Mm-hmm. I'm the person that I'm the least surgical with in terms of my own stuff. And so as I get older, I'm trying to exert that process more on just my own, whether it be with my health, my attention to family, the things what is it I value? What is it I thought I valued? And how do I act on those values? And did you do that today? And most times the answer is no, unfortunately.
I'm with you. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Windy talkers advertise, wearing suits bought with lies. Nothing comes as a surprise. They are lost, but you are wise, navigating what arises. Look into strangers' eyes, trying kindness on for size. Tell me what you recognize. Tell me what you recognize. Every single day is a chance to see humanity advance. But bitter gods look down at ants, scrolling through the avalanche of politics and quick romance, navigating the expanse of rectangles and circumstance, of rectangles and circumstance.
As you were talking about teaching these, teaching these students these 2 weeks, I mean, I just think about the fact that, and I'm a tech director at a school in St. Louis, so I'm around K through 6th grade students, younger students every day, and I just think about, even in the last 10 years, the external things that children, adolescents have to deal with that we didn't when we were growing up. Just the mass consumption of media, the social media piece of it, the device dependence that everyone seems to have. There are so many external things, I think, that can be part of the thing that you have to like weed through when you're working with these students that they bring to the table that they may not even realize is informing some of what that might be slowing them down learning a piece of music or something like that.
I'm of many minds. I'm also like, I'm old enough now that I start to be the like, well, we walked uphill both ways in the snow without any shoes, like,
Right.
Suck it up, kid.
Right.
But it's not untrue that there's things I didn't have to deal with this particular type of like cyberbullying or whatever. The idea that somebody may just light me up on social media. I mean, I had that anxiety at 35. I mean, I can't imagine having it at 12 or 17, when you're just bumbling through life. Most of my life is not documented. Most of my failures as a 22-year-old happened, and then the only people that remember them were those who were in the room. And as a student, I'm really great. As now I look back and I'm really grateful that was the case. Not because I'm trying to hide anything or I did anything that I'm ashamed of. But I think it's crucial to have a perishable good experience, meaning today's performance is something that only is going to happen for me and whoever's in the room. And boy, did I shit the bed. But this is a meal that I made for you, and it turned out poorly. And that's it. Nobody else has to taste that meal. Nobody else gets to look at it. Nobody else gets to comment on it. And then tomorrow I'm going to make you a different meal. And now, boy, I nailed it. I took that salmon off the stove right when I needed to, and it rested for exactly the right amount of time. And I didn't use very much salt or pepper. It was just a good piece of salmon, And I think now everything feels like, young students, like they post something and people are like, well, that's the finished product. It's like, no. That's like month 2 of this process that hopefully they're going to do for 4 more years, I would say that the thing I wish that folks could experience, and maybe they are, and I'm just ignorant to it, was the sort of, come home when the street lights turn on culture. When I was young, even through high school, I would I would leave at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and I would be riding my bike or my moped all around town, walking into abandoned houses, new houses that were being built, like just being like, what's in here,
Yep.
and doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing, but just messing around, playing tennis for 8 hours a day, and then playing home run derby. And my mom, not that they didn't care where I was, but I didn't have to check in.
Yeah.
When the street lights came on, though, you better believe my mom was out on the stoop being like, where are you?
Yeah.
And I just think I would say that heavily influenced my life as a percussionist. I think even to this day, I think most percussionists you're in the back of the room, and you basically, as long as you're home when the street lights come on, everything's cool. And the flute players and the clarinetists up front, they're the ones, just because of the primacy effect, they're the ones that get the most attention because they're sitting right in front of the conductor. And it's not their fault, and it's not the conductor's fault. It's just like, oh my God, by the time you've worked through every reed that broke and every pad on a clarinet that needs replaced, and then you get back to the trumpet and the valve is stuck and there's too much spit and they don't realize that they need to empty the spit valve. And then by the time you get that right to the timpani player, the bell rings. And that has happened for 70 some odd years, at least in higher ed or in any educational system. But I was used to that.
Yeah.
That was my vibe. And I might be ignorant to the way kids are feeling now. Maybe they're getting more attention, and maybe that's good. And the byproduct of that will be a higher level of seriousness brought to percussion studies at a young age. And I think that I wish that one thing I wish that would change, and I see a little glimmer of it, is that I hope, like the way we look at higher ed, the way Bob Van Cise taught us at Yale, the level of seriousness he required of us. And it's like, well, if you make it here, you're going to, just go to this school and you'll be fine. It's like, well, what if we taught sixth graders like that? Like, to an appropriate scale, like scale it to sixth graders and be like, no. Do you understand who John Cage is? Do you understand who Johanna Bayer is? Do you understand who, Pauline Oliveros is? Like, let's try this, and just be the first person to put them in that Pauline Oliveros boat and push them out into the sea, and just take pride in the fact that you were the first one to get to do that. And I think, unfortunately, it's like planting a tree. You're not going to be impressed by that tree until 300 years have passed, but boy, you're going to be glad you planted that tree as long as you water it a little bit. I just think the scope of higher ed would look completely different in 25 years if we required fifth grade teachers to have their doctorate, just like that. That's sort of like, no. You do not get to teach here. And I don't actually mean that, but just like, no. Have you toured the world? How are you going to teach fifth graders what it means to make a mistake and to play music at a high level if you haven't actually done it yourself?
Yeah.
That's
yeah, absolutely. No, that's amazing. No, I couldn't agree with you more. No, it's, I think back to, 13 to 17, 18-year-old me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would have the emotional stability to grow up in a time as now. I'm glad that I grew up when I did for so many reasons. One of which being that, like you said, I mean, thank goodness, I didn't have my life documented on the internet, for better or for worse,
Well, I think I also have to remind myself, just like I'm trying to think about history in this way, is that it's not like all of these kids woke up and all of a sudden Facebook and Twitter and all of this stuff appeared. Like, right. It happened. There was choices being made every day, and it slowly leaked into the life where now anybody who's born has never not had the internet. For me, I remember being at Yale when Facebook was founded, and it was only for Ivy League institutions at the time. So I just happened to be at Yale. And so Stanford and Princeton and Harvard and Yale, you had access to Facebook. And I was like, well, I've never felt elite, so I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to be in a club. And so I joined, and it was just pictures of coffee, your cat. I checked it once a week, just like I check my email once a week. Mm-hmm. And every day you'd wake up and it'd be like, oh, here's a picture of my coffee. And then the next day, here's a picture of my coffee and the thing I'm eating with my coffee. And then it's like, well, here's a picture of my coffee and this bagel. This bagel wasn't good. All of a sudden, the critique started to slowly leak its way in. And now And then there was a real apex of just that, like you couldn't, anything you posted, you knew you could possibly get roasted for something that you hadn't thought about. And I feel like now it's subsiding a little bit, and folks are, again, slowly day by day making choices to be like, you know what, I have a negative feeling about this, but maybe I've realized no one cares what I think. So I'm not going to waste my time critiquing it. And again, like, you know, it may resume its sort of a dark influence on our lives, but I think it's slowly ebbing in a way that I'm very curious to see where it heads. But yeah, I wasn't worried about somebody taking a video of me at a party after having too much to drink, saying something dumb. You know, I just said something dumb and had all my friends look at me like, and that was enough shame for me to be like, oh, okay, this is now what I need to do. I was lucky enough to be involved in like Caribbean cultures since I was 21 at University of Akron. I went down to Trinidad. Didn't have a cell phone. I had to call my now wife. I called her on a payphone in Trinidad once over 3.5 weeks. And the rest of the time I was this white kid from rural Ohio in a place that was totally foreign to me, and saying things and not understanding slang. And was somebody making fun of me? Why aren't they giving me this nickname Lobster Man? It's because I got a horrible sunburn, and people in Trinidad generally don't get sunburns, you know? But that when you get a nickname, it's a term of endearment. And like just all of having to learn that in real time, I think is a real, like, I think every student should be required to go on like a 3-week tour somewhere, and you're not allowed to have your phone, and just come back when the lights turn on, you know?
That's it. Yeah. So much perspective would be gained in those 3 weeks. Yeah, absolutely. Josh, I've had a great time chatting with you. I could just sit here and talk with you just about life and all of this forever, but you have to go back and start week 2, right? You guys, do you have stuff later today, or do you have? I'm
going to brunch with my wife and our dear family friends. One of them, their birthday was last week, and so we're going to go have brunch with them. And I'm their uncle, sort of, but we call them our nephews. They're not really blood nephews, but they're kind of like, I'm the crazy uncle who brings them things that make a lot of noise and piss their moms off, you know. But they're family, and I love them to death, and I just kind of can't wait to hang out at lunch and talk. You know, Otis, the youngest one, he loves to talk about farts, and so I'm, you know, my day is going to be filled with winking at Otis and trying to get him to laugh at the table and make his mom's upset.
That's wonderful.
And then Monday we start back up at Soci, and it's I'm psyched to jump headfirst into that deep end.
Excellent.
Brad, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I would love to have you as a guest on my podcast and pick your brain a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
But you're great at this. I think the resource that you're giving folks across the board just to take a peek into someone's life and also hear what it means to, one of the things I've learned as a podcaster is listening is really hard.
It is.
I don't know if you look at the wave files of like your voice and the other person's voice and you're like, oh, wow, I talked 70% of the time today. And it's a real challenge. And I think you're modeling for folks a really, really good and genuine way to do it. And I really appreciate that. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you. And best of luck. And just thanks for the music. Thanks for the influence. Thanks for all that you do. And yeah, just best of luck to you.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it, man.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to the Bandwich Tapes wherever you listen, and consider leaving a rating or review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.